So if you're watching TV last night, you know the Republican Party suffered an embarrassing setback in the state of Alabama. Democrat Doug Jones defeated the Republican candidate Roy Moore in the special Senate election to replace Jeff Sessions. The loss means that Alabama, which the president won by 28 points last year, will have a Democratic senator till at least 2020. Are there lessons from this that we ought to be learning? Tammy Bruce is a radio host and our friend, and she joins us tonight.
Hey,
so, Tammy, you watched the election as carefully as anybody. What did you take away from it?
Well, I took away from it, first of all, that I won't miss Roy Moore, so I'm kind of glad that that's over. At the same time, look, people are saying, oh, it was a shocker. Oh, this is a sea change. This is an amazing event. It wasn't a shocker. I mean, we saw even with Roy Moore's previous elections, they were kind of close. So he's one Republican who didn't have major success in a lot of ways like President Trump did in his elections. But what we saw here, of course, and I think the biggest issue that we experienced was the lack of a unified GOP, right?
Yes.
You had a horrible, frankly, a horrible candidate, kind of the end result of the beginning of what Mitch McConnell did at the start. A lot of people talk about Mo Brooks. You've been hearing him brought up on occasion.
Yes.
And that was, you know, a candidate that would have really been good for President Trump. And yet I think it was Mitch McConnell felt that Luther Strange would be more answerable to him. So that's when Mitch McConnell first intervened and interfered. The end result, of course, as we know, was the election last night. So I think that ultimately everyone who's saying, the Democrats are saying, oh, this is a huge thing, it really isn't.
Just to be clear on what you're saying. So you're saying that it was meddling by Republican leaders in Washington.
Right.
That caused the chain of events that got us Roy Moore.
It still would have been very, very close. But when you're looking at Shelby saying, oh, I'm going to write people in, you know, giving people permission, like it won't necessarily, I'm not telling you to vote for Doug Jones. But in fact, I tweeted that, in fact, if you write someone in, you are effectively voting for Doug Jones. And here's the difference. I think that it reminded me of the Scott Brown win in 2010. That also was supposed to be a sea change. He wins the Ted Kennedy seat in deep blue Massachusetts.
Right.
Well, you know, hello, Senator Elizabeth Warren, just a couple years later. And Mr. Brown is now the ambassador to New Zealand. This is similar. Doug Jones will be a senator for about 2.5 years. Alabama will then elect a Republican for that seat. But what the Republicans and what the president must learn here is that the establishment interfered from the beginning, separate from the election last night.
Right.
And that caused, of course, a typical Republican debacle. And this is the lesson for the president to intervene here. It's not a sea change. I think the Democrats will make a huge mistake thinking that this can be applied to other races because it was a very unique dynamic. It was a local experience. Yeah. And in the meantime, it also won't have any long-term impact on what the Republicans need to do. But we need to look at the midterms, and I think they now have a better chance of expanding their majority in the fall if the Republican establishment wants the majority. I'm not so sure at this point that they do.
I agree with that. Actually, I'm not sure they do either.
Yeah.
Tammy Bruce, thank you. Good to see you tonight.
Thanks, Tucker.